Okay, we proceed with tables. So tables, we are going to look at the operations that we can perform on the tables. How do we create the tables and how do we manipulate tables, and we shall look at a few examples. So we are saying that, as I've been mentioning, a table is the primary data container for a database. There's no any other component, especially in the relational databases, that contain data apart from tables. They are the primary. So without a table, you have nothing. You don't have even a database, or the database is useless. So a table definition is composed of three parts. One, we have to specify the name of the table. Which table are we creating? Okay, the table is course, the table is student, the table is maybe staff, the table is results, the table is payment. So you have to specify the name of the table, and we are saying that this name should be unique within your database. If you have created your database as ERP, you cannot have two tables with the same name. So you cannot have two course tables. You cannot have two tables with the same name course, okay, or student. So the name has to be unique. And then the table attributes, that is the columns. So we have to specify the columns that make up this table alongside their data types, specifying which kind of data are they going to be holding. So we say, okay, course code is going to be holding character data type, or maybe string data type, or variable character data type. Maybe duration is going to be holding integer data type. So you have to specify, okay, the column is duration and its data type is int. The column is faculty, its data type is variable character. Or the column is code and its data type is character. Then table constraint. Constraints, these are restrictions that we put on columns so that we can determine, or we can, like I told you about the index. So if a column is supposed to have unique values, so to avoid duplication, we need to add a constraint. We need to add a restriction so that no two records can have the same value under that column. So use constraints like primary key and foreign key, then unique, and some others as we are going to see them. But the constraints are optional. Okay, a column we can just create a column with just a name and the data type without a constraint. But sometimes we need them. So these are the three parts while defining a table. We need to specify the table name, then the columns, okay, and their data types, and optionally the constraints or the constraints. And the column could have one or more constraints. We could define a column that is unique and also maybe that has a specific list of values, or so we can have so many constraints defined on the same column, or we can even not have any. Okay, so it is optional. Okay, then that was about the table definition. What do we need while defining a table? We are going to shortly see how to do that with those three attributes or details. And then the operations of the table, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 operations that we can perform on the table. But the main ones are, okay, the main ones are 4 that we always do mostly. That is to create, to create the table, and then to insert, to delete, and to update. So rarely do we do the altering, but if it is required, then we can do it. Okay, to create this one, we create a new table. As we said here, while defining, if you have to define the table, we use the create operation keyword. And then the outer is to change, as we saw with the database. In case you need to change the table definition, you have defined a table, you want to change its, you want to change maybe something with the column, you want to change the data type of a given column, or you want to change a column name, you want to change, or maybe you want to add a constraint to a column, you want to add a column, because you may create a table, but then you realize after creating you need to add a column. So instead of creating a new table again, you just have to modify using the outer statement and you add a column. Or you just want to remove a column, again we use the outer statement. So any modification that you want to do on the table definition, we use the outer. So here they're saying that table structure by adding or removing, changing column properties, etc. We use the outer. Then insert to insert, delete to remove rows, and to update is to modify, and then drop is to remove all the records, and to remove the table from the database with all its records. So table operations are not reversible. That is, they are not, you cannot undo once the query is successfully executed. For example, once you create a table, the table is created, you cannot undo it unless you just come and drop the table. Okay, but you cannot undo this. Or maybe if we insert a record, we cannot undo the insertion unless we just come and say we want to now to delete. So once the operation is successful, it is permanent unless you call on another operation that reverses it, but you can't undo the same operation. So again, before we practically look at a table, we also need to pay some time to look at what primary keys are. If I'm to go back here, so as you identify the columns of your table, we need to single out one column that is going to act as a primary key. A primary key is that column that has unique values that uniquely identify the records within that table. So here we can say that, okay, we can make our course code unique, whereby not two records can have the same value in there. Maybe this one is LLB and the faculty is low, and maybe the duration is 4. Okay, so if I'm to have a student table here, whereby the student table, we know that we have a reg number, and have the student name, you have the gender, and you have maybe the address and date of birth. Okay, so we know that no two students, you cannot have just maybe 0, 0. Okay. It will be confusing. What can I use? Maybe S001. Okay, and then just a moment. Just want to use the tab set that I have. Okay, so name could be maybe Amanyaga Mugegariwa Gerabid. Okay, Nashif is close. So we have Nashif, and maybe the gender is maybe his male, and address is maybe Chibuli. And I don't know his date of birth, but it could be maybe 19. I think most of you are children of 2000s. Okay. Nashif, I'm sorry if you're older than that or younger than that, but we are just learning. So 002, and maybe this one is maybe Fatuma, and this is going to be female, and maybe she lives in Chisugu. Okay, I was going to type Kabalagala, but Kabalagala has its issues. Chisugu. Okay, and then maybe, oh sorry, this is supposed to be a date value, so it could be 2000, and maybe in the month of that, and maybe on the 30th day, and then maybe 2000, maybe 1. And maybe in the month of, okay, in the October, and maybe 25 or 2050. So my point here is, not two students could have the same reg number. Okay, we cannot have Nashif and Fatuma having the same reg number. So as we're designing our tables, as we're creating the columns, we need to specify one single column that is going to uniquely identify each record within the table, whereby not two records can have the same value. So that is what we mean by the primary key. So how do we create primary keys, and how do we add them? How do we drop the primary keys and the constraints? So a primary key is a column or a set of columns that uniquely identify each row in the table. So here we get to understand that we could only have one column to do that for us, or some other times we could have a pair of columns or a combination of columns to uniquely identify a record, as we shall see how to do that. And then a primary key must contain unique values. You cannot have two records with the same value, so this one cannot be accepted. And then cannot contain null values. So a primary key cannot contain null values, meaning that what we mean by null or cannot contain null values, you cannot have a record whereby we have a student here, maybe this is Adada. When Adada, okay, let me first finish up here. Maybe she's also from Chibuli and the date is the same as Fatuma's. I just don't want to fight. So, but what I mean by not null, we cannot have a record when this column doesn't have a value. So that's what we mean by it cannot be null. If it is null, then we can have a record when maybe someone we don't know his or her address. This is okay. But we don't expect to have a record in our table for student when we don't have a student reg number. Who would be that student? We can't, okay? But for Adada, maybe she might have maybe somehow, whatever, but we don't have the address and it is okay. Maybe it can be filled in later on, okay? You can just add it later on. But for a unique value or an index, we don't expect a record that doesn't have, so it is a must. So this is what we mean by a primary key column cannot contain null values. It means that you have to declare the primary key column with not null. So not null is a constraint that we can add on a column when we do not expect a null value for it. If a column we don't expect someone not to have, for example, again, we don't expect a record when someone doesn't have a name, meaning that also name is not a null. We can define it with not null. The same thing with gender. No student can claim that I don't have a gender, okay? But someone can say I don't have a next of kin, but never offer. It is possible, okay? Or maybe he doesn't have maybe an email address. He doesn't have maybe whatever else, but at least name and gender. We expect that any student should have these two, and in addition to the reg number. So you can find that we can find ourselves defining these three columns with not null. Not null specify that no record can be added when these values are not provided by the user. So if you do not, MySQL will force the primary key column as not null implicitly. So even if you don't write this while defining a primary key, we are saying that MySQL is going to do it for you. Okay, so it's going to add it automatically for you. Okay, so I'm going to skip these slides. They are just taking much of my time. Okay, you will read the differences. I just want us to go right away to the tables. I'm not skipping them because I don't know how to explain them, but I just want to rush to the practical part of our recording. And I'm going to start that with a new tutorial because this one is almost there. I always want to maintain 15 minutes duration of video recording so that I keep it short.